Good morning. Thank you for being here. We appreciate everyone who was able to join us this morning. My name is Callie Cornell with the Center for Collaborative Education. And as we get settled and as we have a few more folks join us, we'll ask that you could put your name and your school or district in the chat. There's a lot of new to us faces, and so we're anxious and eager to get to know you. So as folks are settling in, we'll ask that you share your name and your district in the chat. Good morning, Liz, Dave, Peter, Jeff, Chris, Kim, Jane, good morning. Great to have you all here. We've got a good group of folks, so we'll go ahead and get started, and then we'll have some additional folks joining us. And I see there might be some cross-district folks. I see the Jane Daly, so a few folks connecting and sort of know one another across district. Glad to have you all here and glad to already sort of have some connections with one another. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Just so that you're aware, today's webinar or workshop is being recorded. And so you'll be able to access the recording after in case you want to come back or share with colleagues any information that's shared today. But we also have live transcription available if you would like to use that. So in the top, I believe it's the left-hand corner of your Zoom, though Zoom has been updating, and so it might be somewhere else on your screen. There should be a red live with Otter button, and if you click the down arrow on that, you should be able to see closed captioning in real time if that's something that you would like available to you. A quick introduction of our team. So as I said at the beginning, my name is Callie Cornell. I'm the Innovation Pathways Consultant with the Center for Collaborative Education. I'm joined by our colleague, Jennifer Guatcan at DESI, who I'll invite to say good morning and say hello.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Great to see familiar faces and new ones alike. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to spend the next couple of hours with you. I want to ask a question. Are folks seeing at the top of your left-hand side of your screen, the recording icon, like kind of blinking, like and flashing sort of a text box across? Okay, Callie, I think folks are seeing that. Okay. So I'm wondering if we could work on that somehow, or maybe when Allison joins, if she could work on it. But
sure.
Sorry, just wanted to call that out. Sorry about that. Thank you. Glad that you're all here.
Yeah. I've just disabled annotations and then sort of reshared. Is that helping or no?
Flashing on my screen.
Okay. It might also be something in your own box you're able to turn off. So take a look at your own controls and see if you're able to turn that off from your own controls. I apologize for that. Our Allison Plez, who is our third person on the team here, is our tech guru, and she's currently stuck in traffic as she's commuting into Boston to the office this morning. I just got a text from her, so she'll be joining us shortly. So if that is something that you see flashing, I do apologize and hope that that's something that as soon as Allison gets on, we can cover that and remedy that. Because there are several new folks, many new folks on the call today, just a quick introduction about CCE and who we are. So the Center for Collaborative Education is a Boston-based organization whose mission is to partner with schools and districts and communities to increase voice and ownership, and particularly thinking about equity and opportunities to reduce systemic racism, to transform schools so that we serve all students. And so we are proud partners of DESI, where we provide technical assistance to the Innovation Pathways community of practice. So that includes both folks who have received designation as well as those in the pipeline and applying for designation, as you all are here today by expressing interest of coming today. And so among workshops like these, we do lots of other events like program spotlights, webinars, PLC meetings, a whole host of events to support you both in the design of your pathways as well as implementation. We have a technical assistance website, and if I could ask Jennifer if you could put this link in the chat for folks. And so we have, sort of separate from the DESE website, which can sometimes be difficult to navigate, we have our own technical assistance website specifically for the innovation pathways. This is where you can get resources from all of our past events. So one of the great things about being fully remote is we're able to record all of our sessions. And so all of the things that we've done since spring of 2020 have been recorded and are posted on that website for you to access. We're at the end of this academic year, but as we come into next year, all of our event registrations will be posted there for next year. You'll be able to post or to register for events directly from the site. And you'll also be able to access our toolkit and several other resources, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But so that website is always there and always available to you. And this morning, as we're together, we've got several goals of our time together, but really we want to make sure that you all, as new to the designation process as prospective applicants, understand the innovation pathways guiding principles, the core characteristics, have the understanding of the logistics of the Part A and Part B application components and the processes for those, for giving you all the information you'll need to be ready to start planning this year and meet the deadlines throughout the year. We'll also spend some time sort of like really understanding the experience and some of the needs that you'll have at this point within your planning. So we'll spend some time doing some self-assessment and some discussion around your current design processes. And as is always a goal for each of us and each of our events is to build connections across the Innovation Pathways network. And so you all now as prospective designees, we consider part of the network and hoping that you make some connections both with Jennifer and I and with peers today. So with those goals in mind, today's agenda, we will, as we are doing now, welcomes, introduction, do some connections. We'll do some talking at you for a little while. So the Innovation Pathways overview, sort of what are they? What are the components? What does this mean? We'll give you a little bit of time to do a self-assessment, sort of a tool that we use. And we'll talk in much more detail about it when we get to that section of the agenda, but we'll do some assessing about the design and the components you currently have in place and sort of assessing readiness for applying, get a chance to process and debrief with peers in some small breakout rooms, and then of course come back and we'll talk about the application process, deadlines, financial support that's available to you, and do a little bit of a closing at the end. So what we like to do is always start with a connections piece. And today we actually have a poll. So there's a number of you on, we've got a larger group today. And so what we'd love to do is learn a little bit about your experience and what information you're coming to this workshop with, and what you know about innovation pathways. And so I'm going to launch a poll now, and we invite you to let us know what your experience is with innovation pathways. Are you a current designee who is seeking another designation? Are you sort of had started a pathway in previous years and are looking to finalize that pathway this year? Are you a totally new applicant or in early stages of planning for one or more pathways? Or are you here just to learn more, not seeking designation yet, but just curious about this process, curious to know more? So we'll give you a moment to complete the poll and then we'll share the results in just about 30 seconds or so. Looks like we've got most folks. We'll give you 10 more seconds. All right. Sharing these results now. You should see a pop-up of the poll on your screen. So it looks like the majority, 3/4 of folks are new applicants or in the early stages. So a lot of new names, a lot of new faces to us. We're excited to have you here, excited that you're interested in this process and that you're beginning the process of planning for and applying for innovation pathways. We also have some returning designees, so folks who have a pathway but are applying for another pathway designation. And so excited to have some of you here. And then finally, we've got a couple folks who maybe are just interested to learn a little bit more and have heard about innovation pathways, might potentially be applying in the future, and so are here to just learn a little bit more. So grateful to have you all here. So I'll stop share. And you'll forgive me, I've got a small screen in front of me, so I'm still seeing that pop up. Just taking a moment to push that away from my screen so that I can get to the next slide. So we're about 15 minutes in, and we've not yet talked about what our innovation pathway is. And so some of you might be familiar, but it might be completely new to some of you. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about what our innovation pathways, what are the components, what's the landscape currently look like, and then give you a chance to ask some questions, take a look at a self-assessment tool that we have to dig a little bit deeper into the components. So what are innovation pathways? What are some of the core experiences? What sectors are included? All of these things. So innovation pathways are state designed programs that connect student learning to in-demand broad industry sectors and really guide participating students to relevant post-secondary education and training. So innovation pathway programming is really designed to provide students with coursework and experiences in high demand industry areas, and are designed to create strong partnerships with employers in order to expose students to career options and really help them develop the knowledge and skills that's related to their chosen field of study while in high school. And so separate from traditional vocational or CTE programming, these are not career specific pathways, but really about exposing students to an industry sector, sort of a wide breadth of industry opportunities within a particular sector or particular industry that they're interested in. And so participation in this kind of pathway really contextualizes student learning. It's intended to engage students in their high school experience and can lead to opportunities for meaningful careers in those relevant industry sectors, upon completion of their post-secondary education or training. And so all innovation pathway programs are designed to increase equitable access by eliminating barriers to student participation. This is really intended for all students to have the opportunity to enroll, participate, engage, and then successfully complete the pathway experiences. And schools and districts can apply for designation in one or more pathway areas. In fact, we have some districts who have designation in all 5 pathway areas, and then some schools and districts who have 1 or 2. Jennifer, anything you would add here?
I think you did a great job synopsizing that. And also I'd like to extend a welcome to Allison, who has joined us from our team, Allison Pless, the Center for Collaborative Education.
Great. Thanks for letting me know that. I can't see the participation list, but Allison, thanks for being here. And so if you have any technical pieces that pop up throughout, please let us know. Allison can help with that, so send her a chat behind the scenes. Also, Allison, I'll flag for you that some people have a flashing live button at the top of their screen, and I don't know how to get rid of it. So if you could, once you get settled and once you're able to join us, or hoping that you might be able to figure out what that flashing is and might be able to disable that for folks. A little bit about the landscape of innovation pathways. So there are currently 148 approved innovation pathway programs across the state. And we had 27, which is the largest number so far, new programs that were approved this spring, so just last month. And so we're so excited about this growing network, and really speaks to the need and the interest across the state from students and families and communities around these type of pathway experiences for students. And so programs are currently in 60 schools across 51 districts. And this fall we'll have a minimum of 4,000 students across the state who will be involved in innovation pathways programming. And so you can see a full list of designees on the Innovation Pathways website from DESE, and I'll drop that link in the chat. There we go. And so if you follow this link, you'll be able to do is see all of the existing innovation pathways designees, as well as the sector in which they were approved for their designation. And so what are those sectors? We've said a lot about industry sector. So there are 5 approved sector areas for pathway programming to fall under as part of Innovation Pathways designation. And that's advanced manufacturing, environmental and life sciences, information, health care and social assistance, and business and finance. And so all designated programs have to be aligned to these industry sectors. And as of right now, we'll sort of show a quick breakdown of where we are this year with a few additional designees. We have healthcare and social assistance. We're pulling in front as our highest number of programs, with manufacturing closely behind. We also had an uptick in environmental and life science this year as well. And we're excited that all of the Mass Hire local workforce boards are active innovation pathway partners. And so we'll sort of talk a little bit more about this, but Mass Hire, your local workforce board members are a partner with you in this, and they're all actively involved in the innovation pathways planning and implementation process across the state. So we could share a lot about innovation pathways, and we do, but it's also really helpful to hear from students, to hear what's the impact it's had on them. And so we were fortunate enough this last year to have a panel of some brilliant students from programs across the state. And we're hoping to share just a brief video of them for you today. So I'm gonna stop sharing for just a moment because I realized I didn't share my audio appropriately. So I'm gonna reshare and do that now. And we'll play this video.
I went into this program my freshman year knowing that I ultimately wanted to become a medical doctor, but I had no clue of what specialty or where to start in my educational journey. So through workshops and guest speakers that the program offers to the students, I've been able to explore and compare the varying career paths and have a direction towards what I want to do post-high school graduation.
I always knew I wanted to go to college for like robotic engineering or something, but I didn't have a good grasp of the kind of job or place I'd want to work after college. And after my internship, I'm probably going to apply to work at FTL Labs since it was a great experience and I'm comfortable with the people there. The Pathways has also given me a lot of chances to do unique classes I wouldn't have had the chance to do or would have even thought to do, like a programming class, networking.
Through the pathway, I've thankfully gotten the opportunity to meet some of the most driven and ambitious people I know as well. One of my friends from the class is 15 and she's in the process of starting her own clothing brand. And another person from the class just recently got a scholarship for an out-of-state business program, which I think is very incredible. We also had meaningful assignments that connected to the real world.
An incredible group of students, and throughout the year we certainly have the opportunity to hear from students and peers and other educators, but just a taste of some of the things that we've heard from students throughout the year or throughout the last couple of years. So we want to spend a little bit of time talking about relevant guiding principles. And so the guiding principles are a crucial component of innovation pathways. They really provide a framework for innovation pathways programs, and all innovation pathway programs are rooted in these 5 guiding principles. So the work that we talk about throughout the year, thinking about design and implementation, are all rooted in these 5 guiding principles. And Part A and Part B applications, or the application that you'll have to complete as part of the designation process, is organized and asks specifically about each of these 5 guiding principles and core characteristics under them. And so we'll talk first about the guiding principles and then about the core characteristics over the next several minutes. So we have here the 5 guiding principles. Equitable access is really around designated programs, prioritizing students that are underrepresented in educational enrollment and completion. So innovation pathway, programs should be structured in a way that eliminates barriers to student participation so that all students can participate and be successful in completing the pathway experience. Guided academic pathways. So under this principle, programs are structured around clear and detailed student academic pathways in terms of coursework, course sequencing, and experiences beyond the classroom. So students should be exposed to authentic experiences, academic rigor, and career opportunities that allow them to make informed decisions about what career pathways to pursue after high school. The third guiding principle around enhanced student supports, it really is around programs having to include sufficient wraparound services to promote student success. And so in the application process, in yearly reports, be asking about these processes around student supports that really include ways to both identify academic and non-academic challenges for students who are enrolled in your particular pathway program. The fourth guiding principle is around connection to career. And so this is where programs expose students to targeted opportunities that are intended to lead to industry careers and in career sectors. And so thinking about targeted exposure can come in the form of opportunities for workforce and career skills development, kind of career counseling, work-based learning throughout their time as part of the pathway. And then finally, effective partnerships guiding principle. So this is around a requirement of a formal partnership between a school or district and MassHire, which is your local workforce development board, along with one or more employer partners. We see many of our designee schools do have multiple partners from industries, but it's crucial that there's a partnership between you, your school, and your district, your local MassHire board, and at least one employer partner. I'm going to pause there. Jennifer, anything you'd add? We'll talk a little bit next around the core characteristics, but here's anything you'd add around the guiding principles.
Sure. Perhaps around equitable access, there should be an intentionality in being very proactive about recruiting students who are traditionally underserved. So students with disabilities, English language learners, students who may be the first in their family to go to college, low-income students. But we really are looking for, again, that intentionality and proactivity to include those students.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
So here we have our core characteristics. And so these core characteristics are also required in order to receive designation, but not separate from the guiding principles. These pieces really help fulfill those guiding principles. So we don't see them as separate, we just see them sort of as a deepening underneath those guiding principles. So in Massachusetts and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education really recognize that these 6 core characteristics, when they're integrated into a coherent set of strategies and services for students, work towards ensuring that there's high quality pathway programming for students. And so with that, we'll talk about each one in a little bit more detail, and that will sort of give some grain size and sort of specific requirements underneath the guiding principles, underneath the core characteristics. And I'll invite, Jennifer, at any time, please jump in if there's anything that I've missed. So under the core characteristic of advising, this is an expectation that well-designed college and career advising is embedded as part of the pathway program, the pathway experience for every student, and that this advising ultimately supports students in developing a clear understanding of their post-secondary options and the courses of study that are available to them. So that can include higher education, training, career options, a whole host of things. And it requires that students have an individual learning plan. So you all are familiar with or have gone through training with MyCap. So think about what the MyCap process is to support students within the pathway, and what's that advising process that surrounds students within the pathway. Jennifer, anything to add here?
Just want to make sure that people know what MyCap is. So My Career and Academic Plan is a 4-year, actually it's 4 years, this point it's actually being extended into the middle grades. but it's an approach to college and career advising, and there's training that is offered on an annual basis. So if you have not completed the training at this point and you're interested in pursuing the Innovation Pathways designation, we'll want to make sure that you get into the training for this next year, and I can send you information on how to go about doing that, getting registered.
Great, thank you. Yeah, an important component. The second core characteristic is around labor market demand. So programs are intended to be aligned to labor market demands in their local region and across the state of Massachusetts. And when designing programs and applying for designation, programs have to demonstrate that there's a current or projected labor market demand for skilled employees in the chosen workforce sector. And again, so we have the list of the sectors here: around manufacturing, information, environmental and life sciences, healthcare, social assistance, and business and finance.
And I might add here, Callie, that those sectors actually came from the Workforce Skills Cabinet's blueprinting process. So it was an extensive process where they did a deep dive, and those are the 5 sectors that surfaced as being high skills, high demand across the Commonwealth. So you might have some within your region that I know that I had a little bit of a sidebar with a friend from the Berkshires about a different sector. That doesn't mean that's not an important sector, but these are the 5 current ones that we're looking at for designation as innovation pathways.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Sure.
The third core characteristic around integrated instruction, and this is really around students participate in a carefully designed sequence of integrated, rigorous instructional courses that are relevant to the pathway. And so they include both technical and academic subjects. And so the scope and sequence for innovation pathways must include at least 2 technical courses that are aligned to the industry sector, and must include at least 2 advanced courses, which can include dual enrollment, AP, or other sort of like college level advanced courses. There's also a work-based learning core characteristic. And so this is where there's structured work readiness, exploration, and engagement activities and work-based learning experiences that are essential components of the pathway design. And so this is comprised of a 100-hour internship or capstone experience that's aligned to the pathway sector. And so we know that the qualities of high effective, high quality work-based learning include by having staff that are a liaison for students between the career or workforce partner and students in the school, including ongoing reflection opportunities for students, really making use of work-based learning plan for students. And there's a template and a model that Massachusetts provides, and then having an end of experience product. So that could be a final presentation, the capstone, a video, a written report, but something that sort of culminates the experience for students that includes both the knowledge and the experience, as well as some reflection on that, given the students' competencies that they've learned and where they're headed into the future. And then we sort of grouped the final 2 together because they're closely linked. So the final 2 core characteristics. So credential preparation means that students, the pathway really enables students to make progress toward the attainment of industry recognized credentials or college credits towards a certificate, an associate's or a bachelor's degree while still in high school. And so industry recognized credentials are not required components, but we do hope that they help students make progress towards those if that's something that they're hoping to attain either while still in high school or after high school. And then the final piece here is around strong post-secondary linkages. So this means that students participate in a wide range of college awareness and engagement activities to inform their post-secondary plans relating to college itself, apprenticeships, or advanced training programs after high school. Anything else, Jennifer, to add around the core characteristics? We went through those very quickly.
No, I think you did a great job. Thanks, Callie.
And so some core experiences. So we know that all programs sort of have their own flavor, are a little bit different based on local context, student populations, workforce partners in the area, but some experiences that are common across is that all students take a minimum of 4 courses, as the sequence of 4 courses as part of their pathway program. Again, sort of 2 that are technical in nature that are connected to building skills and knowledge within the industry sector, and 2 that are advanced courses. And these can include, again, dual enrollment, AP, International Baccalaureate or other courses that are offered in the industry certification or college credit realm. There is the academic career and interest-based advising and counseling component. So we talked about that, including the MyCap, and that's an individually documented plan to support students' future planning as they work their way through the pathway. And of course, there's a strong industry presence and connection whereby students are engaging in work-based learning, either through an internship or culminating capstone experience. It's a minimum of 100 hours in total. And though these are common elements for every program, each innovation pathway program at every school has different elements based on context, connections, local community assets that make every program unique. And so one of the things that we really enjoy about this is getting to know you, your programs, and your context, and what makes your program unique to your student population. I'm going to pause here and see, we've shared a lot of information, and see if there are questions. I would invite folks to, I know that there have been some things that have been asked on the chat, and Jennifer's been attending to that, but invite folks to either put a question in the chat, or you're welcome to come off mute and ask a question to the group that you have so far. And certainly we have a Q&A section later in the workshop as well, but sort of wanted to pause here after we've just shared a whole lot of information.
So I had a question.
Sure.
So my name is Jay. I'm from Wachusett Regional High School. You mentioned 4 classes. Are these full year 5-credit courses, or could they consist of semester 2.5 credit courses? Is it a credit, or is it just 2 and 2?
So they are full year courses. Jennifer, I'd invite you to sort of share a bit more on that. And the credit piece I know is different school to school.
Yeah, the credit piece is different school to school, but the expectation is that the courses would be full year and that they be 4 distinct courses. So I know in the instance of Project Lead the Way came up in the chat, some of those courses can be technical and advanced. So we don't want double dipping to occur, if that makes sense. So even if the courses can count as both academic and technical, we want to make sure that you have 4 distinctive courses. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, we used to run a CAD 1, which was a semester, and a CAD 2, and we rebranded it into a full year course. But if it was a semester course that built on a material for a second semester course, would that be considered a full year course? It was like Computer Exploring 1, Computer Exploring 2. You know what I'm saying? It's a full year course, but they're semesters, but they, you build on second semester what you learned in first.
So you're asking if those 2 semesterized courses could count as one full year course or 2?
If they were as one, if they were.
Okay, yes, that would work.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, I feel like my coffee or tea, but I don't even know what I'm drinking. I feel like it hasn't kicked in yet. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, Jay, for that question. We also have a couple of questions in the chat around MyCap. And so one is sort of like, is MyCap sort of that advising process as part of MyCap requirement? And yeah, so students should have sort of advising as part of their experience from the pathway. And they're also required to have experience with MyCap as part of that individual planning and exploration process through MyCap. And there's also a question related to MyCap. Is it done through the guidance department?
That's a very good question. And so the idea with MyCap is that it's actually becomes a student-driven process. So while the guidance department is involved, we ask actually that a team of folks who are not just from the guidance department attend the training. So we want someone from administration. We would like a teacher to attend, maybe someone from special education. But the idea is that it's going to empower students to connect their course taking with career interests and to like really be in the driver's seat. So the guidance counselors engaging the students in the process.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jennifer. And then we do have a question that says, what differentiates innovation pathways from Project Lead the Way? I wonder if you could share.
Yeah, so a lot of our schools may have relationships with Project Lead the Way, and they enter into the innovation pathways designation process with that as sort of a foundational or building block. So I would say that, innovation pathways is really, obviously there's the orientation around the industry sector. There's the relationship with the employer partner and the mass hire board, but it's Project Lead the Way. Yes, it's those courses, but there are all these other experiences that we would expect that would make whatever you're crafting into an innovation pathway. And certainly there's the 100-hour culminating experience of a capstone or an internship. So yes, Project Lead the Way, that's, I would say that's part of, like, if you're building a car, that may be part of the car, but it's not the car.
Love that analogy. We've got a question around internship and if students can complete an internship at any point in the year, for example, over the summer. And yes, we have many students who do complete summer internships. It's how the program is designed or after school, but then there are also many schools who have sort of embedded within the school day opportunities for students to engage with industry partners. And so that's really dependent on the current structure you have in place, the current context, what that partnership with your local employer and workforce partners looks like to make that happen for students. And then we'll sort of have the final question for now. Again, we'll come back to Q&A at the sort of later in the workshop. But for now, the last question, are some dual enrollment courses are per semester and worth 5 credits? Does that count? Jennifer.
Yeah. So obviously with dual enrollment courses, they're semesterized, so that would count. So we're talking about more about the high school based courses as a full year.
Great.
So equivalent of full year, if that makes sense.
Beautiful. So keep those questions coming in the chat. We'll be, or sort of hold them, write them down, don't lose them. We'll have a chance to come back. You'll be able to both sort of connect with some colleagues and peers on the call and come back to do sort of a more full group Q&A later in the webinar. We want to be able to share a few tools and things that are available to you at this stage within your designation design and implementation process and as you're planning for applying. We have an Innovation Pathways Toolkit that's really designed to provide structures and tools for you all as you are designing your pathway programs, as you're implementing different elements of your pathway programs. And so the Innovation Pathways Toolkit is a forever iterative. We're always adding resources and tools to this. And so it really is designed to support a variety of design, development, implementation needs to be customizable to what you need along the way and put to your particular pathway context. And so certainly it's not exhaustive, doesn't have everything under the sun, but hopefully has enough tools and resources to provide support when and where you need it. And that can be accessed through the Innovation Pathways Technical Assistance website. There's a drop-down tab and a specific page for the toolkit. And then there's 2 ways you can access it. There's sort of on the website, so you can look through the website pages, but there's also a way to download the full PDF. It's a very long document with a lot of links. So unless you and we're always updating it. So if you download it, it might not be up to date always, but certainly always there's an option for you if there are particular things that you want to, or particular components that you want to download as part of that toolkit. The toolkit's made up of 4 sections, or just very briefly an overview here. We've got a first section that's an overview, which includes some context and important things like guiding principles and some guidance from DESE around innovation pathways. We have the core design elements, which are resources from DESE to support your planning and design for the required elements of the pathway. So these things include like MyCap guidance, the MyCap implementation guide. It includes work-based learning guidance from DESE and a whole host of other documents that are around the specific DESE designed and support materials and guidance. The third section of the toolkit is a recommended 4-part process for your design and implementation. We'll talk a little bit more detail about this on the next slide. And then the final section is where, that's like, I think really where all the good stuff is, where all the meat is, right? So these are tools and templates and protocols around specific pathway components. And so we have organized it in a way where we have a section for advising, student supports, academic coursework, work-based learning. So you can go to that specific section and look at all the resources that are available within that particular section. And as we, the network and the cohort gets more mature in Innovation Pathways, we're including more and more Innovation Pathways Community of Practice school examples as part of that. So not only are they examples and information from DESE, from CCE, from a whole lot of other national providers, but we also have information that we're starting to get from the network itself that provide examples. So we have things like course descriptions or model or template MOUs with workforce partners and other things that come right from other folks who are existing Innovation Pathways designees. That 4-part process that I just mentioned, that's part of the toolkit, is really intended to help design through a design process. So starting with building a vision, understanding your community, to the designing and planning piece, and then ultimately implementing and progress monitoring. I would make the assumption that where you all are is somewhere in the building a vision and understanding your community. And so there's a couple of tools that we sort of want to highlight as part of this section. And so the first is around a criteria planning tool. And so Allison will share a link in the chat to this specific tool. We won't spend too much time on this today, but we want to make sure you're aware. So we have what we call the criteria planning tool. We have one for part A and one for part B. And essentially this can act as your checklist for your application process. So what it does is it's organized by guiding principles. So those 5 guiding principles we talked about just a few moments ago, and it provides each of the indicators that you'll have to respond to as part of your application in a way for you to organize all of the information and planning that you need for the application. And so you see this, it's a little bit hard to read, but on the screen, but you have the link in the chat. It's organized by those indicators and has a place for you to mark, like, is it not started? Is it in progress? Is it complete? To really be able to track all of the pieces that will be required as part of the application process. So again, we have a part A planning tool as well as a complementary part B planning tool once you get to that stage in the process. The other tool, we'll spend a bit more time on this in just a moment, but the other tool we want to make you aware of, and we'll spend some time sort of digging into it a little bit in just a moment, is our Innovation Pathways Site Self-Assessment tool. And so this particular tool was created to allow planning teams to self-evaluate where you are in your program design. It is not designed to be evaluative. No one else will see it. And it's organized by the 5 guiding principles. And under each guiding principle, the tool asks you to really self-assess where you feel you're initiating practice, developing, or where you have established and sustained practice as part of the design of your pathway program. So it provides, as you can see on the screenshot here on the screen, a short description of each of those sort of categories as a benchmark for your assessment, and also provides a place for you to list any evidence for your rating and detail any challenges or proposed next steps. So this can be used, and we hope that you will give you time today to use as a baseline, and then can be used as periodic assessment to keep track of your progress and improvement over time. So we use this and have this tool support folks who are entering into the designation process, as well as folks who have been designated and have been implementing for quite some time to evaluate where they are and where are some places for improvement. Today, we'll do this sort of on an individual basis, but we also recommend that you use this with your team where you can sort of either evaluate as individuals and then come together to compare some results and discuss that, or you can come to consensus as a team to determine your self-rating as you're in the designing and planning process. One more note around the Innovation Pathways Toolkit, and then we'll dive right into that self-assessment tool. So the Innovation Pathways Toolkit, I had shared that 4th section, which is really around templates, protocols, tools, resources to support design and implementation, organized by subsection. This is a sort of quick screenshot of those kind of subsections. So you can head into the tool, you can click on any of these subsections and see a whole list of resources that are under that particular topic area. So you see here we have like advising, mentorship, external partnerships, equity-focused design implementation, guided academics, program marketing, student sports, work-based learning. We had a particular need, of course, over the past couple of years around remote experiences for work-based learning and that kind of support. And so we have a whole section of resources that might be helpful to you. And again, it's not intended that this is exhaustive or you use every single tool, but really so that you can customize the support, you can pull the tools you need when you need them. I have been talking at you a lot, so we'll give you a moment to sort of sit with some of this information. So I'll ask that Allison share one more time the link to that site self-assessment tool, and we're going to give you a little bit of time to go through this. So again, the site self-assessment tool is really intended for you to take a look at where you are and sort of use a critical view at the things that you have in place and the things that still need some work as you think about designing and planning for Innovation Pathways designation. So we'll give you, we're a little bit behind on time, so we'll give about 12 minutes. Individually review. You have the link in the chat. You can open that up and sort of review, and we ask you to sort of read through, maybe do some self-ratings. And as you go through, think about where are the places where you feel like you have an asset that are assets to you. You feel to have strong pieces of the program, and then where are the places where you might need some work as part of the planning and designing this year. Where are some places where you might have some challenges? So those two questions: think about assets, think about challenges, and things that need some area of work as you review. Again, we'll give you about 12 minutes, and then we'll come back together. We'll give you a chance to debrief with other colleagues who are on the call, and then we'll continue on with our workshop. So stop talking. You have the link. If you have any trouble accessing, please let us know in the chat, and we'll see you back here in about 10 to 12 minutes. We invite you, if that you're more comfortable, you can turn off your camera while you're reviewing. We'll give you a verbal cue back when we return to come back together. We welcome you to come back together to the whole group. Thanks for taking the time to review. For those who had their cameras on, I can see you reading diligently and making notes and having, for those who are in the same room, having some conversation around the content together. So appreciate your engagement there. We're going to give you some time to process with peers. Just for a short time, we'll give you about 10 to 12 minutes here, but really just thinking about, because when you get into your breakout rooms, we'll ask you to share what pathways you're considering. Of course, introduce yourself, share your name, where you're from, and what pathways you're considering. What did you notice as you were reading through this about your preparation for applying for Innovation Pathways based on the site self-assessment review that you just did? If you didn't get through it all, totally fine. It probably wasn't enough time to get through the entire thing, but hopefully you made enough progress there. And then what questions does a self-assessment review bring up for you, and have some conversation there. When we come back together after the breakouts, we'll have an open Q&A opportunity with Jennifer and I, and then we'll wrap up our final sort of 10 to 15 minutes, closer to 15, talking about process, what are the application deadlines, what's the review process, what are some financial supports available, so all of those logistics pieces that you might still have lingering questions about. So those know that we'll cover towards the end of the session, but thinking about planning and process, what things came up for you as you were reviewing, what questions does it raise for you, have a few minutes to just process and debrief with colleagues. So Allison will be opening up the breakout rooms. There'll be random rooms. You should have 3 to 4 colleagues in the room with you. She put the guiding questions in the chat so that you'll be able to go back to those if need be. And we invite you to debrief with colleagues. So we'll see you back here in about 12 minutes or so. Welcome back, everyone. Hope that you had some good discussions with colleagues and peers and made some good connections across different schools and districts for folks who are interested in applying for Innovation Pathways. We have quite a bit of time now scheduled for just sort of like open Q&A, open wonderings. So we're curious about sort of any what we call wows or wonders that came up in your group. And we're also here for open Q&A. And so we invite you again to sort of share your questions in the chat, or come off mute and can share your questions that way. Either works well for us. And I did just share my screen, but I'm actually going to turn it off so that we can see folks as they ask questions a little bit better than if I'm sharing screen. Jennifer, we have in the chat, is the 100-hour internship during school hours?
Well, that really is the preference, so as to be as inclusive as possible for students, although some schools do schedule internships in the summer before the student's senior year. Really, as you're considering where or how to schedule that internship for the student, definitely be mindful of considerations for that particular student. You know, maybe they do have other, you know, activities that they need to do, but hence why we like to keep them during the school day, but keep equitable access probably at the forefront of your mind. Like, is this helping the student do something they maybe wouldn't otherwise be able to do?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. We have a couple of folks who have raised their hands. So I have an Elle McGinnis. I'm sorry, I don't know your first name, but we'll have welcome to come off mute and ask your question.
Thank you. It's Lindsay. So as I was doing the self-assessment, our district is thinking about 2 different pathways, and I feel like we're kind of in a lot of that middle of the road column. Does that still feel appropriate for us to continue on to the application process for the fall?
Yes.
Lindsay, I would say absolutely. A resounding yes for both Kelly and me.
Okay, great. I have one more question. I've started to look at the application Part A process that is posted online. Pretty intense, nice 40-page document. Thank you for that. So the other question, though, is about the letter of intent that is to be submitted. I believe September is the deadline for that. What is that potentially? How formal is that? Do you have a template? Is there something that you would like us to follow for something along those lines?
Yeah, so if you apply for a planning grant, Lindsay, and we'll talk about, you know, funding in a little bit, then I wouldn't expect that you would need to submit a letter of intent, because the expectation is if you apply for a planning grant, you would be seeking designation, but nothing, you know, intense. Just, you know, I'm, you know, Lindsay McGinnis from Hoosac Valley, and we're intending to submit an application for the Innovation Pathways designation. Yeah, it's just a heads up to let us know, so that way we can ensure that you're supported throughout the process.
And a planning grant is separate than the Part A application?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you're going to give us more information about that shortly.
I will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry for jumping the gun on that.
No, I appreciate it. I feel like that's definitely on people's, you know, at the, you know, the front of people's minds. So I understand.
I think, Lindsay, you brought up something that might be a point of confusion for folks, and we've heard this in the past, is that applying for designation does not come automatically with funding. So the designation itself is separate from some funding opportunities. And so as applying for designation, you're applying for the sort of like stamp of approval and commitment with the state to run this pathway, have this pathway program. There are additional then, once you're a designee or once you're in the planning process, you're then eligible for some additional pots of funding, and we'll talk a bit more about this. We have a specific slide for that sort of towards the end to talk about what those funding opportunities are. So I see a question that came in from Kathleen around the funding opportunities. We'll talk about those in just a few minutes. I had a few additional folks. I think Ruth, you had a hand raised, and so I want to give you an opportunity. And then I see that Dave, you also have hand raised, so we'll come to you after that.
I just wanted to share in our session, one of the folks in our group, Jan Yardley, has actually been through the process. And I think what I really appreciate is that she shared some of her best advice to us who are, you know, considering this. And I think it's worth sharing. So this is Jan's advice, but one is that when you're, you know, going into this process of the grant writing, is to really get everybody at the table together and make sure that you're all on the same team going forward. Putting it on one person to try to just get details from other people isn't always the best way. She stressed that to find the right people to teach these classes, that was essential. And that also something, you know, because in our group, we talked about like classes and what classes we might have. And just to remember that virtual high school and some of those other things, those classes are okay to use too. So I know for me, that was really helpful information. So Jan, thank you.
Excellent advice. So Ruth, thank you for sharing that to the group. And Jan, excellent advice. So one thing that we talk about frequently, or that we hear from designees, is particularly from the lead person, is they sort of feel like an island, right? That they're at this alone. So one of the things that we really recommend, and we've heard from designees, is to say, sort of like, build your team, build your bench early. And those, both from the staff that are at the school, but then also thinking about community partners and workforce partners, can be extraordinarily resources for you as you're designing and building the application and planning for your pathway programs. And so really think about who are those folks who can be your champions and be part of your planning team throughout the year. So really important to think about at the stage that you're all in at this moment in time. So Ruth, thank you for sharing that. David, I see you have a hand raised there.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was curious if you are able to build a pathway where students can have like more than 4 courses to choose from. So like, could there be 6 within our information pathway, and then you choose for the 2 academic, 2 technical? Or does it have to be a very specific progression?
Yeah, so happy to start, and then Jennifer, jump in if I've missed anything. But the answer is yes. And so what we see many or a few folks do is sort of have the foundational courses, if you will. So like everyone takes course 1 and course 2, and then there's some choice from there, depending on the kinds of courses that students are interested in, the specific part of the industry that students are interested in exploring. And so thinking about, just as you're designing those, ensuring that there's a clear sort of sequence and trajectory that students would go through, and then there's some structure around helping support students to make decisions about which courses they would enter into and why. Jennifer, anything you would add there?
I think that was great. Thank you. And we don't want, like, sometimes when you'll see this in the application process, we ask for the courses that could be available to fulfill the advanced course requirements. Some people want to submit like their entire catalog of AP courses. So it's great that you're thinking about like how to curate it. So, so making sure, like as Kelly's was saying, that there are some courses that are foundational, and then that they would have appropriate options from which to choose for those additional courses. David.
And David, don't want to put you on the spot, but I saw in the chat that you really appreciated the folks and the comments from your breakout space, and curious if there's anything in particular in that insight or what they shared that resonated deeply with you.
I think a lot of things that Ruth had mentioned, just the importance of putting together the team, also the importance of getting the memorandum of agreement, starting that process early, because there's can be some back and forth over language. It's like a contract, so it's something to start on the earlier side. Scheduling the internships, flex blocks are helpful, particularly for doing that contact piece. We talked about, it seems like the innovation pathways rightfully go well beyond kind of like the typical student day. So finding dedicated times for that more career exposure and pathway options for higher ed, and then just the possibility potentially for flipped internships. So for students who may be in rural areas, they collaborate with someone virtually, they do the work on the school site, and then can have, like we're virtually conferencing over here, but Joseph and I think it was Joseph and Laura were extremely helpful. So I just want to thank them again.
Great to hear.
And Jennifer, in the chat, we have someone saying, what are examples of classes for social assistants? I wonder if you could share a little bit about what some of that programming looks like.
See, we're actually developing some like one-pager type documents for each of the pathways. I think I'd mentioned that in the chat. So for social assistants, let me see if I can pull up what we're working on. I'll actually share within the chat and so keep things moving.
Great, thank you. I'm also, I'm going to share in the chat as well. We have the Innovation Pathways FAQ guide. And so it's a document that has been a compilation of conversations like this, questions we've received over time. And that's always available to you. It's a Google Doc that we keep, that you have and you're able to view. And we keep adding to it over time as questions come up. And so we encourage you, as questions come up during the planning process, of course, always feel free to email Jennifer or myself, but also feel free to use this FAQ guide as well. There's a lot of particularly sort of like logistics pieces that are listed in here. I'm reminded that I don't think we've updated the dates yet for the application process this year. You'll still see them for this current year, this application cycle that happened over this past year, but we'll update those shortly. But a lot of the other logistics pieces are covered within the FAQ. And so that's always a resource for you as you're going through planning. Other questions that came up for you within your small group discussions, or other things that sort of really resonated with you that you'd like to share with the group that were part of your small group discussion? I was recently reminded that my wait time on Zoom was not long enough. And so I'm conscious of my wait time and making sure you have plenty of time for folks to either find their unmute button or type into the chat. So we'll give another couple of moments. If there are not any questions at this time, again, Jennifer and I are available to you via email. We can set up a one-on-one conversation if that's helpful. But if there aren't any, we'll give it another.
First one. I have one real quick.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I've got
The kneecap training, I haven't taken it. When is the next one? My cap training. Where do I look for that? Because that's definitely a first step I think my team needs to do, is assemble the team and then take that training. Would you suggest that?
Yes, absolutely. So Lisa Harney is my colleague at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, who's the maven for all things MyCap. And she and I coordinate to make sure that schools who have not yet done the training get first dibs at doing the training. So we'll be in touch regarding that. And so those sessions this year have been virtual, but I think that next year is a plan to have them in person. At least some of them, and so they would be regional. So hopefully there would be a site that's closer to you, so you're not going to be expected to trek to Malden, as an example. So yeah, we'll let you know about those, and there are 3 of them, and they're throughout the year.
Jennifer, do you know if any of those are offered during the summer at all?
No, they're all during the school year.
I just have a quick question. A question that came up in our conversation was having the DESE designation for the pathway. What benefits does the school receive? Does the school receive some type of benefits, funding, etc., when they do get that designation?
Like the benefits, I think that I would cite of having the designations, obviously being a part of the community of practice. We, throughout the year, and we'll talk about this later, throughout the year, convene folks for webinars, workshops, their professional learning communities. At this point, designation does not automatically, there's not a per pupil, like an increment for students, but that's something that we have been working on, and trying to get the pathways and get some proof points is helping us in that direction. That is the goal, to have some sustainable funding for these.
And as we mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit more in just a moment, but receiving designation does then make certain pots of funding available to you, and you're eligible to apply for those pots of funding. And so while Jennifer's been working tirelessly to try to get the per pupil funding in place, there are also these sort of additional buckets of funds that you are able to apply for. And so though they are competitive, we've had enough funding in the last several years to anyone who's applied for those pots of funding has been able to receive them.
Okay, because at the school where I teach, we currently have a Project Lead the Way pathway for biomedical science. So I would have to tinker with those courses in order for it to meet the criteria for the DESE designation. I don't, because they said there's no double dipping for technical and academic, even though like the Project Lead the Way classes incorporate both technical skills and academic skills, as well as career research skills, like researching different careers and things like that. So I would have to add the internship piece, I believe, and I don't know if I would have to have other classes.
We can talk about the courses that you're offering and how, and what you might need to add, or possibly not if you have a sequence of 4 courses already.
Okay.
It might be a matter of figuring out the internship or capstone.
Will you provide can you provide an email so I can have
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Thank you. And you're going to hear about all sorts of other opportunities to connect with us. You're not stranded after we have this conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly not stranded afterwards, and happy to reach out at any point. And if there are school-specific conversations, happy to engage in those with you as you're thinking about these and sort of be a thought partner at this stage with you. And one of the things that this brings up for me is sort of really thinking about what the existing structures, both in courses, but then structures within a school you have to play with. Like, you don't have to start from scratch. Like, think about what exists and then build from there. And I would imagine that many of you are here because you have some things that exist and you are hoping to formalize those in some way, shape, or form. And so many, as we've just heard, like, it might be sort of taking some courses that you have, either sort of like regrouping them, so like rethinking the sequence, or adding one or two courses, working with a workforce partner to think about what are the additional skills and competencies that students might need, and thinking about building courses from there. So a whole host of options for how folks think about building out that course sequence as part of the pathway. There's a question, is the planning grant for next year due next week? No. Absolutely not. We'll talk about planning grant is not released yet, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And so I suspect, Laura, you might have been looking, there might be some information in FAQ about last year's deadlines, which are a bit different than this year's deadline. So we'll talk about those in just a moment. So no, you have not missed the planning grant application, not missed the boat for that. In the interest of time and hoping to get you all out a bit early before the 2 hours, maybe give you an extra few minutes back in your day, we'll continue on, and then feel free to keep putting questions within the chat. And of course, Jennifer and I will hang on for a few minutes afterwards as well to answer any specific questions that you have. So I'm going to share my screen once again, and want to talk through some logistics related to the application process. So as you're thinking about applying for designation this year, there are some dates and some deadlines to keep in mind. So the Innovation Pathways Planning Grant, which was just brought up, will be due in mid-July. Is that right, Jennifer? I know that I don't know if the date's been secured yet, but
correct,
mid-July. So have some time, and that will be sort of to help support your Part A and Part B planning process throughout the year. And specifically, the planning grant is for schools who are applying for pathway program for enrollment of students in the fall of 2023. So as Jennifer just said in the chat, you'll hear directly as part, because you registered for this webinar, because you've been communicating and sort of have been, you're on the communication list at this point, you'll receive that information about the planning grant and the details that are required as part of that. Jennifer, the requirements for the planning grant are pretty similar, or pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. We're not asking for a whole lot of information, trying to make this as sort of like easy as possible, low lift as possible to get these planning grant dollars. Is that right?
That's correct. So it's essentially, so you've just looked at the self-assessment tool. There's actually, the first part of the planning grant application is a checklist. So it's sort of a yes, no, there are no right or wrong answers for that. It's just, again, to help you sort of reflect on where you are. And also it asks you to identify like what challenges you think you might be facing and how funds from the state might help you address those challenges. I think it's 5 narrative questions that we're not expecting, chapter and verse and, lengthy responses to that. Historically, if you apply for a planning grant, in fact, I can say this with certainty, if you apply for a planning grant, as long as you complete the questions and there's some thoughtfulness behind your responses, you'll receive the dollars. So please don't stress too much about that. We'll make sure that you have ample notice, so when it posts and when it's due. Just like the timeline this year is different from past years because we have the good fortune of having funding in the proposed budget for fiscal 23, and it's just got to get through all the hurdles to get passed before I can even move things forward on our grants management side. Hence the slightly protracted deadline, but you'll have those funds. You can expend them through June 30th of 2023.
Great. And there's a question in the chat, will the grant application be much different from last year? So someone's been working from that template.
They'll be very similar. So if you have access to that, I would say that it's pretty much the same, just maybe refined a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, just as a clarification, the the planning grant or implementation grant dollars is a separate application process from the designation. And so those are, because you're going through the designation process does not automatically mean dollars will come with that. So there's some other buckets of funding that you're eligible for as part of entering into the planning process or ultimately once you receive designation. There's a question on the typical amount for a planning grant.
Responding in the chat is between $20,000 and $25,000.
And that can be used for stipending teachers to get together for planning over the summer. It can be used for thinking about, planning time, perhaps for some supplies, perhaps it's sort of stipends to support some work for co-planning with a workforce partner. We've seen lots of different creative uses for that funding. So to go through this slide, we sort of got off track a bit, which is great, all the right questions. But so the mid-July will be the deadline for the planning grant. Over the summer, we'll have technical assistance opportunities, and we'll be scheduling individual, what we call intake sessions, which is an informal opportunity, a half-hour, 30-minute time for you to meet with Jennifer and someone from the CCE staff to get to know you, to ask some questions, figure out where you are in the planning process, and hear a little bit about your needs, your projected needs as you move through the school year, so we can better plan for support throughout the year next year as you're in the application process. Part A applications will be due October 27th. Sounds far away. As we know, the year goes quickly. It's not terribly far away. So a date to have on your radar is October 27th. After that, sort of in November, there will be a team of DESE staff that review your Part A applications. And then if you're successful as part of a Part A application, you'll be invited to apply for the Part B component of the application. And so Part B applications are due in February 9th of 2023. And then as part of that final application process, there are applicant interviews. And these are, again, informal opportunities for folks at DESE to sit down with you, learn a little bit about your program, hear where you are in the planning process, and hear your plans in a little bit more detail, ask clarifying questions. These are not intended to be like a hard lift or like evaluative. They're really about getting to know you, your program, your students, and your sort of like hopes and dreams for the Pathway program. The hope is that designations are conferred, so we'll receive final acceptance in late March or early April of 2023. And of course, those who are accepted, have their designation conferred, will begin enrolling students to have a Pathway program begin in the fall of 2023. That's our timeline. So this timeline, all of these deadline specific dates are available on the DESE website, and that's linked at the bottom of the screen here, but then Allison will also share that in the chat. Quick overview of the application process. So as we've said, there's sort of a two-part application structure that's structured around the guiding principles that we talked about at the outset of the workshop today. So we have the preliminary Part A application due October 27th, and then the final Part B application due on February 9th. The guiding principles and the core characteristics are the basis for the application questions. So what we talked through today, what you looked at in the self-assessment review, what you'll see in the criteria planning documents, those are all the basis for the application. So if you're looking through those, nothing in the application should be a surprise. And then we do require sort of a joint application or partnership between the school district and then the local workforce partners, the board, and an employer representative. So that comes as part of the MOU, is part of that formal agreement. And then a note that the ultimate designation decisions are made by the commissioner, who will have final determination. So of course, Jennifer and the review team at DESE will make final recommendations. We'll go through the review process, and then final determinations are made by the state's commissioner. Just a couple of details to keep in mind around post designation. Just like once you have designation, what does that mean for you long term? So once you have a designation, it would mean that if you receive designation this year, that students are scheduled into courses for fall of 2023 for the launch of the pathway, which would mean enrollment in spring of 2023. So that timeline sometimes can be a little bit tight. And so thinking about what's the process, what's the recruitment, the communication, marketing that happens with students, perhaps simultaneously to the designation process to ensure that you have sufficient enrollment in fall of 2023. Designation terms are 5 years. So you'll have designation for 5 years. As part of that sort of oversight, there's annual reporting obligations with specific performance metrics. There might be site visits and then sort of check-ins or a sort of abbreviated review process after the first 3 years. And of course, as part of ongoing support, there are convenings, professional learning opportunities, and technical assistance that's offered through DESE and CCE. So here's where a lot of our questions have stemmed from around funding and financial. And so Jennifer, welcome you to run through these different options. So how innovation pathways are supported financially by the state and some of the opportunities that folks have for funding support.
Great, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, we actually have the luxury actually this is the second time, of having some proposed funds in the governor's budget, waiting for that to go through the whole finalization. So hence the dollars TBD, but we're looking at actually a total of $4.8 million that we think is going to stick. And that funding would be used to support planning, implementation, and support. So support meaning for programs that are in years 2 and beyond of designation. So you're probably most interested in the planning grant opportunity. It's a competitive RFP, competitive meaning we don't know who's going to apply, so then it's competitive. But I can assure that we have enough dollars. Of that 4.8, we're setting enough aside to be able to fund anyone who's interested in getting some planning dollars. It's really is asking you it's aligned actually to the Connecting Activities Planning Grants through the Mass Hire Boards. But it's a short application, as I was saying before, and there's sort of a checklisty sort of thing at the top, and then some simple questions afterwards, just to get a sense of what your challenges are. Again, we'll use that to formulate how we're going to support you over the next several months. And then it'll ask you how you might use those dollars from the state to sort of help mitigate those challenges. I'm hoping that I will, in fact, I've actually done the RFPs, I have them ready, and it's a matter of sort of getting approvals from or green lights to get stuff over to our grants management team. So I'm hoping that I can get the thumbs up to do that. It does take 2 weeks for our grants management team to post. So you'll be looking at probably hearing from us, I don't know, like in 3 weeks. Please don't hold me to that. I'm doing the best that we can to try to get through the process. Just, we're just sort of hemmed in, but I will make sure that you have ample time to complete the application. Again, don't expect it to be too terrible to lift. And dollar amounts, we're looking between $20,000 and $25,000 for planning grants. If you are successful with the designation, and that is certainly our aim, there's an implementation grant opportunity that will be available to you. That is announced after designation is conferred. So typically around, in fact, we're still waiting because the funds are all lumped together in the state budget. So you'll hear in the spring after designation about that process. And again, it's the acceptable funding uses are for staffing, instructional materials, career resources. You could use those to reimburse for dual enrollment. That's another popular area. For funding use, again, dollars to be determined. We do have dollars tied up in the state budget for support grants. So if you've gotten your designation, you're 1 year in, this would be for programs who are years 2 and beyond. We're called those support grants. And then for sustainable resources, there's actually, we've had I don't even know how many millions of dollars that have been invested in Innovation Pathways programs through the Workforce Skills Cabinet Grant Program. That's administered by our Executive Office of Education. Those funds can be used for technology and equipment. So, you know, some of the programs are more equipment intensive than others, and thinking about advanced manufacturing and healthcare and social assistance as examples. But funds from the executive office can be used for that. And if you're on our listserv, which I think everybody who's here now is on our listserv, you will hear about that those opportunities. I think there will be a Skills Capital second round for fiscal 23 coming up soon. But again, those details will be sent to you via email.
And Jennifer, we have a question. If folks are successful in receiving designation, are they then able to apply for Perkins funding?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Some of our programs may already be Perkins programs that you're looking to sort of make an innovation pathway out of, and others, like, you know, could be eligible for Perkins funding. And we have a sort of a crosswalk that will show, you know, areas of overlap and potentially areas that you would need to maybe beef up to be eligible for Perkins funding. But that's certainly something that we'll work on with you together.
Excellent. Thank you. A few notes around support for this stage. So you're all at the early stages of planning. And so this summer, there'll be office hours and check-ins that will offer each of you. So of course, not mandatory, but an option for you. In the fall, we'll have what we call Design Institute workshops. We're hoping, fingers crossed, that we're able to do them in person and have some extended time together. We always have a specific workshop in preparation for Part B. And so as you sort of make, for those who are successful with Part A and getting ready for Part B, we'll have a workshop specifically dedicated to preparing for the Part B application as a support. We have opportunities to do professional learning communities, so those PLCs among applicants throughout the community of practice, and really thinking about supporting those who are in similar stages, similar kinds of communities, or facing similar challenges. So grouping folks in different ways so that you're both exposed to others who are in the designation process, but as well as existing designees, and they're able to learn and hear from and sort of coordinate with them over time. And then, as we've mentioned sort of a few times throughout today's workshop, that we have webinars, site visits. We've been doing them virtually, so calling them program spotlights, but hoping to do some in person next year, workshops, and a whole lot more to support you throughout. And so you are, again, sort of like not at this alone. And I want to make sure that that's clear. Is like, I think particularly in the early stages of the process, it's a sort of often a one-man show, or sort of people feeling like they're on an island. And so not the case. You have this network to support you. This question came up around benefits for being part of the Innovation Pathways community of practice earlier. And so certainly a few things to highlight is that we have the technical assistance website with a whole host of resources that are there to support you, including the Innovation Pathways Toolkit. We have professional learning community meetings throughout the year. This year they happened on a monthly basis. We instituted a peer ambassador program. So there are 6 folks who are existing designees who have been at this work for some time that are available support. And so you can find their bios and information about them on the website. So there are peers and colleagues who have offered, who are in this position of an ambassador, and it's a resource to you. And then we also have tailored support events. And so we really make sure that all of our events are tailored to what you need, the kinds of challenges you're thinking about, and where you are to help support. We don't just sort of have a fully disclosed or fully formed set of TA events. We really sort of are adaptive throughout the year based on what we're hearing from the network. Again, we've shared these resources or these links throughout, but want to share them one more time. And of course, we'll send a follow-up email with this information as well. But there's the Innovation Pathways DESI website, which includes the application materials, all of the deadline pieces, and the criteria documents. Those are all there on the DESI website. And then for all of the support documents to take a look at past events and resources, those are on the technical assistance website, which is that tiny URL that we maintain. And then one more link for you today. As we've mentioned, we do a lot of tailored events. And so one of the ways in which we are able to tailor is we have lots of feedback loops, lots of ways to collect feedback from you all about what you need. And so we're curious to hear how today's workshop went for you. And so Allison's dropped a link in the chat. It's also the SurveyMonkey link on the screen. And curious to hear, it should take you literally no more than 2 minutes to tell us how it went, but we're curious how it went for you, get the information you needed, and what we can do to support you in the future. So we ask that you take a couple of minutes to open that link, to complete it. If you're not able to do it now, please keep it open and complete at some point before the end of the day. We greatly appreciate that. And then sort of finally, just a big thank you from Jennifer and I for you being here. We know that it has been an extraordinarily difficult year, and it's a particularly busy time of an already difficult year, and appreciate the a couple of hours you spent with us this morning. We're excited to get to know you and your school communities more, and look forward to engaging with you in the future. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. My email and Jennifer's email is on this final slide here, and we look forward to connecting with you soon. Thanks so much, all.